Hello YouTube and fellow DC Comic fans, I'm Keith One Shot, and today I'm going to do a quick review on Justice League issue 1, which is the new Justice League book written by Scott Snyder. As the new era begins, we start this book off with this space rock, which is hurtling through space and time. We actually go 85,000 years in the future, where we see Hourman and Kal-El and what looks to be Wonder Woman, and we see the space rock flying through space and time. Then we go 85,000 years in the past, where we see the same space rock flying through time. We actually go 5,000 years in the future with Kamandi, and he's on the Ark, and we see the same space rock flying through space and time. Then we go to the present, where we see like the Immortals, Hera, Ganthet, the Phantom Stranger, the Wizard Shazam, and they see the same thing flying through space and time, as if it's happening all at once, across the universe, all at the same time, in every time zone, all at once. And they seem to know what it is. And Ganthet says, yes, it's the beginning and the end. And he says, Stranger, can we stop it? Then the Phantom Stranger says, no, it would escape us, Ganthet. Besides, it's not up to us now. Then on the next page, we actually see that the Justice League on Earth in Washington, D.C. has built the Hall of Justice, the classic from the Hall of Justice, the Super Friends and all that, the Hall of Justice. And they set it up the same way, where it's essentially like a museum, and it has its secret rooms that are unavailable to the public, and the museum is available to the public, but they have secret bases of operation, and they all voted on the artifacts and on what suits would be displayed in the Hall of Justice, and they voted that all the suits for all the members, I mean, they got everybody in there, from Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Martian Manhunter, to even more obscure characters, and we got, I mean, Ted Kord's right there, which is awesome, and that's really great, and Mr. Miracle's off to the left, and they have all these different artifacts in there, and that's pretty cool, and so they have that. Meanwhile, we go to the next page, where we see the Justice League battling in different groups. They're all battling like these different Neanderthals, and we see like groups of people like Batman in a suit of armor and Green Arrow, and then we see the Flash is battling with a Plastic Man, Wonder Woman is battling with Swamp Thing, we see Aquaman, and I don't actually know who he's battling with. I don't see him back there good enough to say who it is. But then we see Hawkgirl fighting with Hawkman, and someone else there too. We see Superman with Cyborg, and they're all battling in groups, and they're all talking to each other because Martian Manhunter is actually connecting all of their minds together through his telekinetic powers, which allows communication in a different way. Before they were doing it through Cyborg's comlink, but now they're doing it through telepathy, which allows things like the Flash finishes Bruce's conversation before he does, and they all have little jokes where they do, since they're hearing each other's thoughts, they're kind of talking them to each other, but in, like, they're making fun of each other in each other's voices, and they even have a little thing where they say, like, Superman has the best Batman impersonation, and they kind of all agree, and that's pretty funny. Clark disagrees, but it's pretty funny either way. And then we actually see Martian Manhunter flying in space, and he sees all of this happening, and he's connecting them all together on their mission to battle these different groups of Neanderthals across the planet, and he kind of starts to doubt himself a little bit, and he doubts his capabilities and his reasoning for being on this team, and he doubts his purpose because he's been away for so long, and then he came back. We actually see Flash and Mr. Terrific battling their group of Neanderthals, with Batman and Green Arrow battling theirs, Wonder Woman's taking care of hers, and yet suddenly the planet seems to be breaking apart on the surface, and it's not just breaking apart, it's like being ejected from the planet. And Hawkgirl asks Jean if he's seeing this, and so from outer space, Jean is looking at the planet, and as Hawkgirl says, the planet's kind of like being pulled out into outer space, the different like the rocks, and so the planet's surface is being shifted and stuff like that, and they kind of connect it to this attack on the moon that's kind of happening there. Like the moon is acting as like a magnetic pole of sorts, and it's an elaborate plan that they can sense is Vandal savages behind this because of the different groups of Neanderthal tribes in the different sectors that grew up in different ways independently, and then Vandal savages have obviously an immortal, so he's a Neanderthal himself, so he would have access to those type of groups. Martian Manhunter asks a group to kind of calm their minds and unite together so they can think about this, and then he talks to Batman, and Martian Manhunter decides that he's going to attack the moon because that's kind of what's causing this problem. And sure enough, Martian Manhunter turns into this big, huge dragon, which is a He says the name of it. It's a Quinar, an extinct moon nester, and he tells Batman to activate the bombs he has planted inside the moon, and Batman says, "Bombs on the moon? Why would I?" And then Martian Manhunter is like, "Bruce," and Bruce is like, "Fine." And then sure enough, Bruce hits the bombs, Martian Manhunter hits the planet, and at the same time, there's narration going on over the top of it, which is really great, and they say that John Jones gives the plan 50% chance of working, but he does not let his friends know this. Instead, he simply holds them together so that they will not feel alone no matter what happens. But as he hears impact, a chill burns through him, a sense that there is something that he is not seeing, something beyond the danger, a greater darkness. Then we actually go to, it was in Dark Knight's Metal. It was like the Legion of Doom base of operation, again from like the Hall of Justice, Justice Friends, or Super Friends, the old show from like the 60s and 70s. But we see Vandal Savage inside of it, and he has the different leaders of the Neanderthal tribes, and they're saying how their tribes are being disgraced and destroyed, and Vandal Savage's plan failed them. And Savage says that he saved them from extinction, and he's protected them for millennia, and now they're questioning him. And so he threatens the tribal leaders, and he says that it's good because this was simply the first stage of my plan. The next starts now, and it will make good on his promises. And he forms this new Injustice gang with these different Neanderthal tribe leaders. And then sure enough, somebody walks into the room and says, "Your plan will fail." And it actually ends up being Lex Luthor. And he tells Vandal Savage that he's here to tell him that all of his plans will fail because he chose justice. And then as Savage goes to attack Luthor, Luthor actually he shoots him with a gun because he's in his old school battle armor, the green and purple battle armor that Lex has, and it looks really awesome. It's drawn very well. And Lex shoots Vandal, which kind of frees him in place, and then Vandal says, "Aren't you supposed to be, you're supposed to be the hero here?" And Lex says, "Oh, I am the hero. See, I know what you've hidden from me, and every other human on this planet, the darkest secret in the universe. So I'm here to rescue you, Savage, from life." Then we actually see this flashback inside of John Jones' mind, where it's him on Mars, the day that his planet, and all of his people die, and it catches on flames, and how his people chose to disconnect themselves from each other as the planet was burning, and the heart of the planet was burning, and they disconnected John, and his parents died, his wife died, and his kid died on the planet that day. But then we actually, John wakes up from that, and Batman tells him that the threat has been, the subterranean threat has been dealt with, but there's something else going on. So John actually tells him that there's a bigger threat, and that they need to assemble, and they have a psychic boardroom starting. And it's actually really cool because John Jones is able to telepathically create like this table in space and time, and he even says that it will become more materialized the more often they utilize it, and this is just their first iteration. So he's like this, in their minds they're all perceiving each other at a table, but they're actually not. And the Flash says, quotes and tells John how amazing it is, and that he can feel like he's hugging him, but he's not. So they all talk about this greater threat, and John Jones tells him what he saw, and it's that same space rock from the beginning of the book, and they all kind of wonder what it is, what it might be, what's the reasoning, and the cyborg scanners sense that it's an energy that's older than anything in the multiverse, but it's moving with some kind of purpose, and they don't know, like, it has reason. And Cyborg says that he doesn't know, but it's sending out some code that he can't decipher. Then Batman actually tells him there's a myth on New Genesis that the Source Wall was our incubator, and when our universe was ready, a messenger would come through with a code to evolve the universe. And so that they think that this might be the case, and Flash kind of questions it, and he says that the heart of the Source Wall is rocketing straight towards this planet, and it might have a message to evolve us, and it might just blow the whole planet up. So they actually don't know what to do, but it's going to hit in 3 minutes. It's going to hit Earth. And they don't know what to do. So then we actually go back to Savage and Lex Luthor, and Lex kind of deals easily with his tribe of Neanderthals, who they swore allegiance to Lex, but Lex is like, I don't want any of that. So he throws them off the side, and then he ultimately deals with Savage. I mean, he's talking to him about his plan. The time is running out. So ultimately then we go back to the room with inside of their minds with the Justice League, and they're all talking out their plan and saying what they should do, and they call this thing is called the totalitarian, and it's passing Mars, and they have a minute and a half left at this point, and they need to think of something to do at this point. And Batman says that he actually has a backup plan, and he already called him, and it ends up being John Stewart Green Lantern, and he's in outer space with this huge cannon that his bullet contains a materialized omniverse wormhole. It's encased in 10th metal, and it should transport the totalitarian outside of the source wall, which would destroy it. So that's their backup plan, but then they're all kind of voting, and Aquaman thinks that they should destroy it. Some of the people think that it's a good idea to, see if it is actually going to enlighten and, enhance and involve the world. And Aquaman says that he's dealt with gods before, and he says that we fire. Wonder Woman says that our multiverse is dying, so she hopes that it can fix it. And then Flash actually tells the group that that if Hal Jordan's readings are correct, the multiverse will die in a year, maybe less, which I think this is kind of a hint at maybe DC Rebirth, and maybe DC Rebirth is probably ending within a year to a few months, and they're not exactly sure, but this is a subtle hint, because I think that's going to correlate with maybe Doomsday Clock, and not that it's going to end. I hope that it honestly doesn't end and reboot a universe. I hope they kind of just keep continuing, like we've kind of done since the New 52, but who knows, this seems to be a subtle little hint that Rebirth, quote-unquote, is going to be ending, or is ending within a year or less. But they talk about the source wall is expelling energy and planets. Then next it'll be the universe, and that this thing might be the key. But who knows, because it's an unknown force. But the Speed Force was once unknown as well. Cyborg says something about the multiverse it's complex too, and we didn't fully understand it, and we didn't understand the dark multiverse either, and we need to find out what this totalitarian really is. We actually then go back to Vandal Savage and Lex Luthor, and Lex tells him that he wants to hear Savage say it, that he knew it all along, knew that the source wall really was what was inside it. Vandal Savage struggles to try to fight Lex, but he's frozen with this green energy around him, and he tells Lex to not do this, but Lex smiles and says, how could that be? And then Vandal Savage says, look, Luthor, listen to me, we can join forces and then Lex smiles and says, no, you listen, Savage, you're the one human being who knew the truth, coward. Well, now the final moment is upon us, and you built an injustice gang, when you knew what we really needed at this moment was a damn Legion. And then we see the Legion of Doom pop up, which is Sinestro, Grodd, the Joker, Black Manta, and Cheetah, which is very similar to what we saw in the Justice League cartoon. There's a lot of different cues and throwbacks to that in this book, which is one of the reasons why I think it's going to be so amazing, is that it is such a throwback to all these old things that we already love from our childhood, and that a lot of us grew up on, and some of the younger guys are probably looking back on that show now and catching up on it, and it's an amazing show. The Timverse is awesome. But Joker shows up, and he says, language, please! There are fucking children listening! Which is hilarious to me. And then Lex Luthor actually tells Vandal Savage, but when I learned your secret, I had LexCorp, he's pretty much telling him that Vandal Savage built this Legion of Doom base and building, but LexCorp actually bought the contracts, and they modified the design, so Lex knows things about it that Vandal doesn't know. He put monsters in the basement, and he has weapons from the future inside of the attic, and Vandal Savage didn't even know there was a basement or an attic. But then Lex tells him, recognize this, a simple something, he pretty much tells Vantage that he has a great plan, but he lacks the inner vision. And Luthor then says that this is the key. It happens to be made of the only thing that can kill you. And Vandal Savage then says, Luthor, I beg you, kill me if you must, but the truth you seek, don't. It's too terrible. And Lex says, I know. And I can't wait. Then we go back to the room where the team is still deciding their vote, and Martian Manhunter pretty much tells the rest of the team that he questions his role on the team. He's unsure. He was gone for a while, and the team was still able to function and do their thing without him, but now he knows that he actually might have his own purpose. And he might have realized what he could do to the team, and that he can connect them all together, because on his planet, one of the reasons why they all died is because they chose to fight alone, and they chose to try to go at it alone, and they disconnected from one another, and he says that we can't do that. I'm going to be here to unite them, and they still don't know what's behind the source wall, but, they're going to fight for a greater ideals, and so they actually then vote on what they're going to do, and they ultimately all decide to see what this unknown thing is and to let it hit the Earth, because Vandal Savage's plan was to move Earth out of the path of this thing, because he knew what was coming towards us. He knew what was inside of the source wall, and he knew it was coming, so he tried to do this whole plan from the beginning with the moon pulling the Earth to try to move it out of the orbit of this thing. So he was actually trying to be a hero, because that's what he thought, because he must know that it's this great, terrible thing. But then Lex, actually, we see him pull out the heart of Vandal Savage, and Lex says, "And now, I, Lex Luthor, sentence you, Vandal Savage, to death." And suddenly, as that happens, Martian Manhunter hears a scream. A cry, a shriek, older than any human scream. And it's a mind reaching out to him as it died, casting out all of its secrets onto him. And as the shriek shook him so violently, he lost his connection to his friends. And all at once, he was alone in his mind. He saw the truths. He saw things that he never wanted to know about the past, about the sins committed, the abominations unearthed, and he even saw what was coming. New armies raised across space, ancient gods revived, and beyond this, he saw the laughter with which evil would rise. And then he saw past this, and he saw to the end of the cry, and what he saw was himself, alone, just months from now, at the end of everything, the last living thing in the Omniverse, even his friends burnt to dust. All because he hadn't realized, he hadn't understood, that everything, this multiverse, all of it, from birth to maturity, youth to crisis, all of it had been built over an unseen door, a secret. Now in this moment, at this table, hands in the air, he and his friends unlocked that door, and suddenly, all J'onn J'onzz wanted to do was go back now. He told himself, go make them change their minds. And so he did. J'onn J'onzz reformed the boardroom, but the time had passed too much, and his friends were gone. So he watched the thing come, and he told himself that what he'd seen hadn't been true, that whatever laid inside the totalitarian was good. Still something a part of him sensed otherwise, and sensed an adversary out there, someone at the other end, and in that moment, he knew lines that signal might very well point away from justice, and instead, that pointed downward to a word that sounded a lot more like doom. Then we see Lex Luthor holding this object in his hand, and he's smiling, and he says, "Oh, J'onn, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Then on the last panel, we actually see the totalitarian, the big space rock thing from the beginning, strike Earth, and it says, next issue, Doom on Earth. And that's been issue 1 of Justice League. What do I think of it? I think it's a really great issue that has a lot of callbacks to both the Super Friends and the Justice League, and it actually makes the Justice League book seem so much more important, and I really like that, and it makes it seem like the big event is happening in the Justice League. And everybody has their solo books, and that's cool, but the biggest events happening in comic books should be the Justice League as far as DC Comics is concerned, and that's why these big threats get together, or these big threats happen, which require the League to get together, and I think this is the big threat. And it seems very reminiscent of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoon show, and that's really awesome. And I like the team lineups, and I like the dynamic. I think they made J'onn J'onzz look like a badass in this issue, which is really great because he's been away for a long time, and he's kind of subtly came back, and now he's the leader of the Justice League, and they all voted him in, and that's really cool. And we got the Hall of Justice, and we got this big mission. We just did No Justice, which they had, which was set up for this, which was a 4-part issue. It was okay, but I think that it really didn't do too much for me, honestly, but this book did a lot for me, and I'm really happy about it, because Scott Snyder is a hell of a writer, and it's also going to involve Justice League Odyssey, written by Joshua Williamson, who's one of my favorite writers as well. He does The Flash. He's going to do Justice League Odyssey, which is going to tie into this. And James Tynion IV is going to do Justice League Dark with Wonder Woman and Zatanna and such. And that's going to be amazing, I hope, as well. And that's going to tie into this as the teams start to break up and form several little Justice League Unlimited type teams. And and that's really cool, and I'm really looking forward to it. I do still think that the ancient god that is unlocked is Yuga Kong to some degree, and I think that because they talk about New Genesis, and they talk about this prophecy, and they talk about ancient beings older than the universe at hand, and so to me that sounds like the old gods. I do still think, I thought the Omega Titans might be the old gods, and that might be the threat, but I don't anymore. I do think that the old gods are still coming, and Yuga Kong will be there. The Source Wall did hold a lot of things. It held a lot of the old gods that it defeated. It held Superboy Prime, so maybe he'll come back too, because in No Justice, they released a bunch of the planets as well from Brainiac's ship, like Starfire's homeworld, and there's a lot of things that have been like reawakening in the DC universe from the Source Wall breaking. That held things. What was beyond the Source Wall that's new? Ancient slumbers reawakening by the planets that Brainiac had held captured, like the bottled city of Kandar. You know what I mean? He's got all these planets, and they opened up all at once at the end of No Justice, and now the DC universe is bigger than ever. It's more unlimited than ever, and I'm more excited than ever. And I think this is a great setup book. And if you want, I definitely recommend picking up this book and picking up Justice League Odyssey and Justice League Dark as well, and really going on this fun and wacky ride. I do hope the thing about the year is not true, though that might be like the timetable for the next big event, the next big crisis, because we haven't had an officially titled crisis. Dark Knight's Metal is arguably a crisis, but you know, I think we're building up to a nice big crisis, and I hope that doesn't mean reboot after that. I hope that means restructuring and new stories. But either way, this is my review. I definitely love the book. The artwork is amazing, and I recommend picking it up. I'm Keith One Shot. Take care, have a great day, and goodbye!